Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I looked at this week. The first guy, Jake Burger of the Chicago White Sox. So Burger, one of the hottest pickups of the week here in fantasy baseball, added in 21% of fantasy leagues and still available in 78% of fantasy leagues. On the season, 8 home runs, 23 RBIs, 18 runs scored, a 280 batting average, and a 326 on base. But over the last week here, Burger's taken it to the next level. 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, 9 runs scored, a 458 average, and a 500 on base. Obviously, those numbers aren't sustainable here for Jake Burger. But right now, he's come out of nowhere for this White Sox team after having a small cup of coffee last season in 38 at-bats with the White Sox. And right now, he's getting an everyday opportunity, and that's the big type of power production they need in the middle of the lineup. June 5th at Tampa, 2 for 5 with a run, 2 RBIs. June 7th versus the Dodgers, 1 for 3 with a run and a rib. June 8th versus the Dodgers, 2 for 4 with a homer and an RBI. June 9th versus the Dodgers, 2 for 3, 3 runs, a homer and RBI. June 10th versus Texas, 2 for 4. June 11th versus Texas, 2 for 5, a homer, 2 RBIs. And June 12th versus Texas, 1 for 5 with an RBI. So right now, if you need a utility man or even a third baseman here, Jake Berg is definitely doing a good job, and he's shown power over the last few weeks here. And while he's red hot, you definitely should go out there and get him this week. The next guy, MJ Melendez of the Kansas City Royals. So Melendez, he qualifies a catcher, but he plays a lot of outfield, obviously with Sally Perez as the catcher over there in Kansas City. And the top prospect in the system, or one of them, I should say, coming into the season here was Melendez for the Royals. 6 home runs, 16 RBIs, 14 runs scored, a 267 average, and a 341 on base. But he's another guy over the last few weeks here, hitting 326 in the time here. Melendez, he's still available in 44% of fantasy leagues. But right here with the great catcher eligibility, with a guy pretty much playing every day, obviously, he's a great ad in my opinion. And you should go out there and get him. We know catchers are a very weak position. Melendez, he's hitting for power right now, and he's been on a hot streak lately as well. So right now, with all those factors, he's definitely a big ad this week. The last few games for him, June 6th versus the Jays, 0 for 3. June 7th versus the Jays, 0 for 3. June 8th versus Toronto, 1 for 5 with a run, 2 RBIs. June 9th versus Baltimore, 1 for 2, a homer, 2 ribs, 2 runs scored. June 10th versus Baltimore, a homer, 3 RBIs in that one. June 11th versus Baltimore, 1 for 4, and June 5th and June 12th versus Baltimore, 0 for 4. So right now, playing good baseball. I know the last couple games he hasn't done much, but he hit 3 home runs in the last couple weeks here is MJ Melendez. And with that catch eligibility and a guy playing every day, he's a big pickup, no doubt about it. This week, the next guy I looked at here, Michael Harris of the Atlanta Braves. So Harris, ever since he got called up, pretty much this Brave team's went on a tear, winning 11 games in a row. So on the season here for Harris, no home runs, 6 RBIs, 9 runs scored, a 294 average, a 321 on base, and 2 stolen bases in 51 at-bats. So right here, very quick player, Braves top prospect from the hitting side of things. And he's getting the everyday opportunity, batting ninth with no pressure on him. And a guy who's going to help you in scoring runs and steal some bases, I believe, down the line as well. I know he's only got 2 so far, but I think as the season goes on, he's definitely going to be good in that category. June 7th versus Oakland, 0 for 3. June 8th versus Oakland, 2 for 4, 2 runs and 2 ribs. June 9th versus the Pirates, 1 for 3. June 10th versus the Pirates, 2 for 3, 2 runs, a stolen base. June 11th versus the Pirates, 1 for 4 with a run and RBI, a stolen base. And June 12th versus the Pirates, 1 for 3. So right now, he's hitting the baseball well. He's on a 5-game hitting streak. And obviously, the Braves believe in Michael Harris here. And he's widely available in tons of fantasy leagues, surprisingly, with especially the top prospect in the Brave system getting up, available in 74% of fantasy leagues. And I definitely will give him an ad this week. The next guy, Kyle Farmer of the Cincinnati Reds. So I sound like a broken record over the last few weeks here. But Kyle Farmer, he's still available somehow in 47% of fantasy leagues here on the season. 5 home runs, 34 RBIs, 22 runs scored, a 274 average, and a 333 on base percentage with 4 stolen bases as well. And he's a guy who qualifies at a weak shortstop position and third base here. And I don't know why people still have him on the wire. He's hitting 406 in the last month here, is Kyle Farmer. And the RBIs are pretty solid for a guy with only 5 home runs to have 34 in the season. So the last few games here for Farmer. June 6th versus the D-backs, 2 for 3, 2 RBIs. June 7th versus Arizona, 2 for 4 with a run in the bag. June 8th versus Arizona, 0 for 3. June 9th versus the D-backs, 0 for 3 with a rib. June 10th at the Cardinals, 0 for 3. June 11th at the Cardinals, 4 for 4 with a run and an RBI. And June 12th at the Cardinals, 1 for 3 with an RBI. So right here, he's going to drive in runs. He's been stealing the bases. And like I mentioned, that batting average has skyrocketed over the last month of the season with a crazy 406 average in the time. Obviously, he's not going to be this hot here, but he's got to be owned in way more than 54% of fantasy leagues. So if you need shortstop help, he's a huge ad this week as well here. No doubt about it, is Kyle Farmer. The next guy is Jose Trevino of the New York Yankees. So he's come out of nowhere after bouncing around over the last few seasons. And with the Texas Rangers last year on the season for Trevino, 5 home runs, 18 RBI, 16 runs scored, a stolen bag, 309 average, and a 356 on base. But over the last 2 weeks here, he's hitting 500 in the time. And this guy, he's been piping hot right now for this Yankee team. And this Yankee offense, it's been contagious over the last few weeks. 18 runs in last night's game. Matt Carpenter, he's been a big signing for them, surprisingly. And Trevino's been playing great as well. I know he's banged up a little with his back, but hopefully he's day-to-day and could be a good add. So the last few games for him, June 3rd versus Detroit, 2 for 3, a homer, 3 ribs, 3 runs scored. June 5th versus Detroit, 0 for 2. June 7th at the Twins, 1 for 4 with an RBI. June 9th at the Twins, 1 for 3 with a run. June 10th versus the Cubs, he pinched hit, 1 for 1 with an RBI. June 11th versus the Cubs, 3 for 4 with a homer and RBI. And June 12th, he was scratched with the back injury. So right now, not a lot of pressure on him at all. He's pretty much been an unknown and a guy who's not been productive in his career. Here's Trevino. Last season, 240 average with 5 homers, 30 RBIs. And this season, he shattered that pretty much already here. So hopefully he's not too injured. And he'll be a big get, no doubt about it, with a guy hitting like this at the catcher position. And he's available right now in 84% of fantasy leagues. The next guy's another catcher and top prospect for the Toronto Blue Jays, Gabriel Moreno. So Moreno called up a couple days ago here, and he's been a pretty decent ad, added in 20% of fantasy leagues here over the last couple days, but still available widely in 73% of fantasy leagues. So far in the young season, for him, he's 1 for 7. What a run is Gabriel Moreno. So Moreno, he did everything he could in the minor leagues. I know here this Toronto Blue Jay team have Alejandro Kirk, who's been playing good baseball, but so far since he got called up, here's Moreno. He's been playing every day for this Blue Jay team. So it might take him a couple games here to adjust and get things going. But as long as he's having consistent at-bats and playing at least 5 days a week here as the catcher in Toronto, which I imagine he will. You're not going to call up one of your top prospects and have him sit on the bench here. So Moreno, he's a decent ad this week, and we'll see what he could do. But I would give him a couple weeks at least here before going until you drop him or make a move with him. But definitely give him an ad this week here because, like I mentioned, he's in a great lineup in Toronto. Not a lot of pressure on him, and he's been a top prospect in that system for a reason. The next guy, Lane Thomas of the Washington Nationals. So Thomas last season, pretty decent with Washington once he got traded from the Cardinals to the Nats. This year so far, not a great year, but still showing some productivity. 6 home runs, 23 RBIs, 22 runs scored at 242 average, a stolen base, and a 303 on base. So right here, Lane Thomas available in 88% of fantasy leagues. And I know this national team, one of the worst teams in the league this year here. But Thomas, the last couple weeks, hitting 366. He's the table setter for this national team. And the funny part is here, they actually got some guys who can hit the baseball. Obviously, Juan Soto, one of the best, if not the best hitters in baseball. You got Josh Bell, who's having a good year, and Nelson Cruz, who's been coming around a little of late as well. But right here, the last couple weeks is where Thomas has excelled and has shown he could have some fantasy value for fantasy owners. The last few games for him as well. June 5th at the Reds, 2 for 5 with a run. June 7th at the Marlins, 2 for 5 with a run. June 8th at Miami, 0 for 4. June 9th at Miami, 2 for 4, run and a rib. June 10th versus the Brewers, 3 for 5 with 3 runs. June 11th versus the Brewers, 0 for 2 with 2 runs. And June 12th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 5. So if you need some power, some runs scored, and a decent batting average, I think Thomas is more of a deeper league yet in 12 and 14 team leagues, but he could help you, like I mentioned, in a few categories. The next guy I looked at this week here is Bryson Stott of the Philadelphia Phillies. People wondering why Stott was still on the roster, and people are speculating because he was good friends and went to school, obviously, with Bryce Harper. But right now, the last couple weeks here, Stott's proved those doubters wrong. On the season, the numbers are still horrible, though. 4 home runs, 18 RBIs, a stolen base, 16 runs scored, a 189 average, and 246 on base. But the last few weeks here, Stotts, he's hit a different gear now. 4 home runs, 11 RBIs, 12 runs scored, a stolen base, a 333 average, and a 385 on base. So right here, he's been hitting some big home runs, including a walk-off home run last Sunday versus the Los Angeles Angels. And this Philly team, ever since getting rid of Girardi, they've been on fire, winning 9 out of 10 games here. And Stott's definitely been a big reason of that. And another guy who qualifies at shortstop, but mostly plays second base for this Philly team. He's available in 78% of leagues. So the last few games here for Stott, June 5th versus the Angels, 1 for 5 with a homer, 3 RBIs, 2 runs scored. June 7th at the Brew Crew, 0 for 4. June 8th at the Brewers, 3 for 3, a homer, 2 RBIs, 3 runs scored. June 9th at the Brewers, 0 for 3. June 10th versus Arizona, 1 for 4 with a run. June 11th versus Arizona, 1 for 3 with a homer, 2 RBIs. And June 12th versus Arizona, in that one, 1 for 3. So he's found the power stroke. He's scoring runs. And this Philly team is a dangerous team, obviously, when their hitters are hitting on all cylinders. And we've seen that the last 9 out of 10 ball games. And I would give Stott an ad, especially with that shortstop eligibility. And if he does struggle again, you just drop him back to the waiver wire. The next guy, Tommy Pham of the Cincinnati Reds. So Tommy Pham, he's been a very good pro over the last 5-7 years here in the major leagues. On the year, 7 home runs, 24 RBIs, still scoring a decent amount of runs, 34 scored, 4 bags, 246 average, and a 342 on base here. But the last couple weeks is where he's getting it going, is Tommy Pham. 297 average with 2 homers, 7 RBIs, a 372 on base, and 8 runs scored. So Pham's been added in 10% of fantasy leagues over the last week, but he's still available in a decent amount of leagues at 57%. June 5th versus Washington, 3 for 4 with a run, a rib, a stolen base. June 6th versus the D-backs, 0 for 4. June 7th versus the D-backs, 2 for 4, homer, RBI, 3 runs scored. June 8th versus Arizona, 0 for 3. June 9th versus Arizona, 1 for 4 with a run. June 10th at the Cards, 1 for 4. June 11th at the Cardinals, 2 for 5 with a run and 2 ribs. And June 12th at St. Louis, he's continuing the power, 1 for 3 with a homer and RBI and 2 runs scored. So right here, Tommy Pham showing power. We know he plays in the bandbox over here in Cincinnati, and he's getting an everyday opportunity. We definitely could see him getting traded to a contender, because obviously the Reds, one of the worst teams in the National League, and a team that's not going to be in the playoff hunt, and almost are pretty much out of it already here in mid-June. So right now, if Tommy Pham's on your waiver wire, he can help you in runs scored. He could give you some decent power with the 8 home runs on the season. And I would give him an ad this week. And the hitter I looked at this week here, Riley Green of the Detroit Tigers. So one of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball. And he's a 5-tool player as well, is Riley Green. So he's been added in 15% of fantasy leagues over the last week here, with a lot of people thinking he's going to be called up soon and stashing him on their bench here at their Rene spot. So right now, he's still available in 59% of fantasy leagues, but I think this is the time you should go out there and get him. The Tigers, they need some pop in that lineup, and they need a guy to energize the lineup as well. And we know the Tigers, when it's all said and done this season, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the American League, in my opinion. So a guy like Riley Green to sell some tickets, and a guy to be explosive, and a 5-2 player that could really take off with all the hype around him, especially him being one of the best prospects in all Major League Baseball, I would go out there and get him. And I know some of the prospects so far that have come up haven't done much this year, but I think Riley Green is different compared to some of these other guys. And right now, it hasn't been much for Riley Green in AAA Toledo here. In 17 at-bats, a 294 average. And his OPS is over 930 in 3 games. And he's a big prospect, no doubt about it. And right now, I think he comes in the next couple weeks here, or by the end of the month later. So Riley Green, he's definitely a good stash and a prospect you would want on your fantasy team when he comes up for the Tigers. So that's a few hitters I look to add here for Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season.